Welcome to Team Futurism. Today we're going to be having an epic gun debate. Devin and I have we've always kind of discussed guns, and we have some areas of agreement, some areas of disagreement, and it's such a conversation that you kind of have to have as an American at some point.
Hmm.
And it's interesting to me because it does have a futurism element where there are now tons of
Definitely.
ghost guns.
Right.
If you have the right sort of things in your garage, you can just put a gun together. Um, I've never looked into that specifically myself, but apparently it's actually not that tough.
Really, you seem like the type.
Believe it or not, so my backstory, I grew up in a small town, as I've mentioned before. I had a paintball gun, I had slingshots, I had kind of everything around guns. I just never personally myself had a gun, but I knew a ton of people who had guns. I was more on like the fishing side of being a country boy rather than like the hunting side. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I did every outdoorsy thing under the sun other than hunt. But I had no kind of, it wasn't offensive to me. It was just something I never got into, probably because my parents were a little not encouraging of it. But the small town thing, I'm sure we're gonna like have that as a thing that exists, right, in this conversation
Yeah.
is a small town thing. You and I both now live in cities where it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just let me just go ahead and say outright, let me get my stance out here.
Wait, first question. Hold
Yeah,
on.
okay.
Do you own a firearm or are you just a cuck lib?
Oh, cuck lib. Oh, absolutely. At this point, I would not own a firearm,
Are
and
you
I
an
could.
American or
I have tried to buy a slingshot, but apparently you can't get a slingshot from like ordered to like certain like it won't order here. It will say it does not ship to your location. I've checked multiple websites because I used to have a slingshot and I was amazing at it. I could take out bees nests, like shit like that.
was
And
this
but
slingshot for home defense?
no, I was gonna get one for home defense, absolutely. Because
No way.
well, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Nice,
I'm
dude.
a believer in that shit. Okay, but
I feel like just shock and awe would discourage a robber from coming any further. Like they're definitely expecting to be shot and like, dude, like
yeah,
little packet of cayenne powder, like some kind of
no,
fucking
man, you get you
15th
get some
century ninja.
you get some marbles, and you could
Mm.
kill a motherfucker. Absolutely.
Ah, you're
Okay,
right. Yeah, little
you know.
David and Goliath action.
If people think that's ridiculous, go to like a local hardware store, get like an epic slingshot, and
True,
go like try not to kill squirrels in the woods. You know what I mean?
true,
It's
true.
yeah. Okay, so no, I know you have a couple guns, right?
I do. Yeah,
And you've shot a bunch.
I have. Yes.
Okay, so let me come out with my most like cuck lib, offend every right winger in America take. I think that the Second Amendment is bullshit. I think it's not interpreted correctly. I think it should go away. And
Mm,
I think that we should be a modern society where we like respect guns for what they are. They're things that kill people, and that's it. For the most
mm,
part, they're used to kill people, and we should realize that and not pretend like, oh, this is my defense or this is for hunting. Blah, blah. It is those things, but the majority of it is to kill human beings, and we should
right.
like. And what that means, the implication of that is like. You can own one, sure, but you gotta like, just like a driver's license, you gotta go through some hoops, and they're not easy hoops. And the second you have a domestic violence thing, you're never getting near a firearm. The second, a lot of red flags, and it's very hard.
Yeah,
It's just too easy. The
I would
bare
agree.
basics is too easy. That's my take. I'll kind of leave it there for now. But how do you
Well,
fit into that world? What's your
that's
your
interesting
standpoint?
because I think that you kind of hit me right where I'm at too,
Cool.
because I'm a gun owner, and it was a little bit of a process to get. I have a shotgun and I have a long gun. It's a semi-automatic. It's kind of like a similar to an AR-15, but it's not as tactical looking. It's just a ranch rifle, but it's semi-automatic repeating. And to get both of those, I had to go through some stuff. I think I had to
Hmm.
go through like a 30-day background check, and then there's like a holding period where they obviously had to get my firearm safety certificate, which was comically easy to get. Like
Hmm.
there's no, I mean, the bar is real low on that one. But there was I missed picking it up a few times because there's like a very kind of small window where they're like, okay, you put the application in on this day, and then you have to come back X amount of days later, but not
Mhm,
too many days later. But it's kind of arbitrary. It has nothing to do with like gun safety or anything like that. It's just kind of a hassle in
mhm,
California. In Montana, it's totally different. You walk in with cash, you walk out with a gun.
right.
That's it. It's no big deal, which galls me a bit. And I think that you're absolutely right. Like I think we're past the point of no return on having guns,
Mhm,
but damn, dude, there should definitely be more to it to get one. Like you're right. Like it has the power to end human life, and you should be yeah, tested on safety minimum, but there should be some screening. You should have to
mhm,
go through a background check. They background check you in California, but they're not like it's not a real background check. They're not background checking you like a job would.
mhm,
There should be, yeah, definitely more controls and barriers to getting guns because we just don't need guns in the hands of dumbass people. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I think we basically agree on that. But my question is,
mhm,
if for what you were saying, if we transition to a society where it's highly limited, I mean, what does that look like? Because there's more guns than people now.
mhm.
How would that even be achievable to get what, like 400 million guns off of the streets and back into the hands of reasonable people somehow?
Mhm. Yeah, so this is I there are this is what's complicated about the gun talk, any gun talk, is there are different levels of harm, and you can tackle, there's different solutions for each level of harm that's caused in
Mhm.
society. I
Mhm.
think that we should predominantly look at what kills people the most,
Mm.
and let's just take some easy ones. So like suicide and accidents. Right?
Sure.
A couple things like that. And it's handguns and suicide, I think, that's the most deaths.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we can pretty easily just let's just make a goal that, and this is, I think, Republicans and Democrats get on board with this. Let's make a goal that in 5 years from now we decrease suicide by gun deaths by 20%. You know what I mean? And how do we work towards that? I think that that's like we need to start with that sort of a conversation.
That's smart.
Um, and that's a thing you can do with like a background check if you have a mental illness or that sort of a thing. I it can be harder to get, and I don't and there are definitely things that people have solutions for that. Start implementing those, because the problem right now, I think, is that people talk about there are more guns than people in society, like you just did,
Yeah.
and people talk about the most recent mass shooting, and every mass shooting is slightly different, and those are
Right.
just, I think, bad places to start. I think that we can get
Yeah.
there, right? I think that we
Yeah.
totally can. Um,
Just
more
piece
guns
by
than people in
piece.
society, I don't completely know what to do about that, to be perfectly honest. I think that that's a
Pretty
fact of life,
intense.
that
Yeah.
that's like, just in America, we do have to like grapple with that somehow. I'm not an expert on that thing. But I mean, what do
Right.
you think about like my approach of let's just take the low hanging fruit here, which isn't the sexy stuff that gets news headlines, but it's like suicides and it's accidents, and a lot of things that come down to just people not being trained correctly and not storing their guns correctly,
Yeah.
and a lot of things like that. Like kids, think about this. This happens all the time. A kid will find their dad's gun. The
Yeah.
dad says, "Oh, always have it locked up properly, always."
Right. Right.
Well, that kid just got a hold of your gun. It accidentally went off. Maybe no one died, but your
Or
kids are
maybe
taken
killed your
away,
wife.
dude. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe killed somebody, but like your kids are gone. Like you don't get your kids
Right.
back after that. CPS
Right.
comes in and
Right.
your kids are gone. That's a
Right.
huge harm in society. Never makes the news. Like
Right.
fair,
Right.
unless someone dies, that makes the news.
Right.
If no one dies, that does not make the news. But that happens all the time, and that can be solved for. That can be fixed.
I think it's interesting that really kind of seamlessly segued into my other major thought about
Mm,
this, which is that when it comes to suicides and mass shootings, I think we're talking about like kind of the same thing there.
okay.
And I
Okay.
think one of the debates that happens around guns is really facile and interesting to hear people say, well, we need less guns because we're experiencing these gun related problems. And I'm like, man, dude, suicide is not a gun related problem, and neither are mass shootings. Like in a functional way, they are because they're happening with firearms. But in a much deeper way, I mean, let's take mass shootings to start with. But you think that there's maybe a reason why there's such a strong demographic through line between mass shooters. It's like young, disaffected,
Yeah.
white, like late teens men. You know what I'm saying? It's because that demographic has a mental health crisis in this country, and there's a huge mental health crisis in this country. You've got something insane, like over 50% of people are on antidepressants, or maybe it's not antidepressants, but like one or more pharmaceuticals that are treating, something like that, whether it's an opiate or an antidepressant. And I think we're in this situation in society right now where there's a bleak, we're living in some late stage capitalism, man. The bleak reality of the proletariat is actually coming back to that weird, like Upton Sinclair, the jungle level where I think a lot of people are feeling legitimately hopeless in different
Mhm.
ways, like I think kids, like, unfuckable late teens white kids are struggling with not being able to, like, perform a role in society that they feel is necessary. I think people are committing suicide for all kinds of different reasons, but a lot of it because we live in a strange system where corporatism and capitalism are so intermingled and are choking out a lot of low income people and even the middle class now, and we don't have a superstructure for mental health support in this country, which blows my fucking mind. I mean, Reagan lets everybody out of the mental health institutions in the 80s because obviously there's some shady stuff going on, but more so doesn't believe that the state should foot the bill for people's insanity. And it's like, well, then who is it? You know what I'm saying? Like, who's footing the bill for people's insanity? Because now we've got tent cities,
Mhm.
and it's the society that we live in that's boxed these people out of having a way to exist in a way that seems equitable and amenable to them. So here's my central, and I'm interested you think about this. I
Yeah.
don't think guns are the problem at all. I think it's a mental health problem, and I think that if we're going to
Don't you think that they
reduce,
go together though? Because all societies have mental health problems. Only America has
mm,
this, and it's because we got the guns. That's unavoidable.
but do you think that
Because I agree, it's mental health, but it's like, yeah, plus guns.
you
But clearly, guns are part of this picture. Because that's a Joe
but
Rogan thing. I want to punch him in the face when he says that. The gun, it's all mental health. It's not the gun. It's like, shut the fuck up. It's guns, dude. It's guns.
Do you think the guns relate to? Do you think those two things are interrelated? That the fact that we have guns is exacerbating the mental health issue, or do you think that the mental health issue is something that's reaching out to the guns for a way of making effective the feelings that people are having?
You know, well, let me give like a blanket statement of like something that I think is
No,
true.
no blanket
Yeah, yeah.
statements, Peter.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a little dodging your question, but let me just like let me throw this out there, which is I think that if we had a technology, right, that if any male who was between the ages of 18 and 35 touched a gun, that gun would automatically lock up and be unusable. Any gun in the world. We would no longer we would no longer have any robberies or murders or
That's
school
good.
shootings. Not 18, but let's 16-year-olds do this sort of thing.
Sure,
A 15-year-old just did a mass shooting 2 days
that's
ago. Okay,
that's
so
crazy.
males under the age of 35, if they touched a gun and some DNA thing and the gun locked up, we would not have this conversation. It's totally a demographic thing, and it's not all
Sure,
mental health. It's like just being a dude and being frustrated and angry and like for some
sure,
reason and it's copycat things, you know what I mean? Because
sure.
like
Mhm.
I think that we all have mental health problems and we just like deal with things in different ways. Like everybody fucking does. You know what I mean? Modern
Sure.
society is hard. Even if you don't have a mental health problem, you're overly stressed out sometimes. Absolutely. And
Right.
people, it's the copycat thing. there was an island one time that they had never had a suicide. Malcolm Gladwell writes about this. Never had a
Oh, I
suicide
remember
in
this. Yeah.
thousands of years, right? One
Right.
person, and it was a high profile person, committed suicide. The next year they had 50 suicides. The next year
Right.
after that they had, it was like an exponential thing of suicides. That's literally it. That is everything that we deal with right now with the school shootings and the suicide thing and on and on and on. It's in books, it's in movies, it's on the news, and it's copycat. That's what it, like. I don't think it's mental health either.
Sure.
I think that it's
No,
no, I don't, because I think that people can have mental health problems and not like shoot up a school and not shoot themselves. I think
but
that
here,
like you can have a mental health problem and do a million trillion gazillion destructive things, and even self-destructive or societal
sure.
destructive. Why guns? It's not random. It's a copycat phenomenon.
I think maybe I think you're right. Just to say, I think you're right. I think that obviously the reason that people shoot other people with guns is because it's something that we grow up seeing it in our culture. And like, I'll give an anecdote before I ask my question of you, and it's that my neighbor in the front, they let their kid have toy guns when he was really young, and it bugged the shit out of me. Like every
Mhm.
time he came over and he was like, "You want to play guns?" and I was like, "Man, that's not cool."
Yeah.
Like, no, not really. You're like 8. Like I don't want, I don't want to see a gun in your hand. Like I know what it feels like to hold a real gun, and it's not fun. I
Mhm.
guess it can be if you're like a hillbilly or something and you're like, you don't, the weight of it isn't hitting you. But as like a reasonable thinking person, when the weight of that object hits your hand, you feel it. You feel the power over life and death that you're feeling. It's serious. You got to take it
Mhm.
seriously. So that, I think you're right. I think that mirroring behavior starts really young, and we definitely are okay with uh I would say Hollywood more than anything indoctrinating our kids, and just kind of careless parents that are, not
Yeah.
that these folks are careless parents, but like parents that are careless about the type of media that their children are ingesting and the type of play that their kids are engaging in. I'm like, I get it, man. By the time a kid's like 7 or 8, you're exhausted. You don't really want to pay that much attention to them and shit. But like, you got to steward the things that they're interested in until they're of an age where they can make good decisions for themselves, and they don't just get caught in dopamine traps like fucking Nerf guns. You know what I'm
Right. Right.
saying?
Right.
But here's my question of you, and here's the thing that I kind of come back to every time when I think about this is, what's easier? Is it easier to get 450 million guns off the streets, or is it easier to figure out how to help a narrow demographic range of people with their mental health problems? Because if you're right. I mean, right? It's not a lot of women that are committing suicide by
Mhm.
gun, and it's also not a lot of women that are shooting up schools and shit. It's not really older men. It's certainly not babies. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And it's not older women either. You're right. It's like 18 to 35 demographic. Is there some way that we could target that audience, that demographic of men, and get them some kind of mental health help service? Doesn't that seem like it would be a cheaper, more effective option than trying to get that many guns? Just as a functional like thought experiment, like how do we solve this problem?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm kind of curious about your thought on solutions too, but I mean, I don't. I think that both are kind of false. I don't think we can
How so?
or should try to get 400 million guns off the streets. It's just not possible, and I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
don't
we
think so
can.
either.
Literally, I do not think that we can solve mental health in America. I think it's something we're gonna have to live with. I don't think we can solve it. It's not.
Really?
We don't. No,
Why?
there's no way. But here's a solution. It's stabilize the
I'm so
economy and
fired
make
up.
like compel people to exercise every day and have a lot of friendships and have stable sexual partners. That's how you solve it. It's not psychologists or pills. It's like it's a and those things, they're getting worse. They're not getting better. So we have to deal
Yeah,
with that.
that's a good
But
point. That's a good
so
point.
my focus is, and I think this is actually where we agree. So it's a little boring, but my focus is literally on the margins. How do we just get 5% fewer suicide by gun deaths this year? How do we
Huh.
get 2% fewer
Slow and
school
steady, huh?
shootings this year? Yeah, I think that it's a slow and steady thing, and I think it does, like, start with a cultural change on top of a policy change. I think that we
Right.
can start to tweak the edges of culture to just make us more of a healthy culture, so that we don't immediately any of us think immediately like, I have a problem, violence is the answer, right? I think that
Yeah,
we're still like Neanderthals in that sense that like, I have a problem. Ooh, violence is going to solve this problem. And that how many movies are out there that are just like based on um uh 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 like the vindictive thing. I'm blanking on like
sure.
but
I believe
just
you were looking for the word revenge.
revenge. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Revenge. Revenge films are everywhere, and myself, like, I write screenplays, and it's really hard to write a screenplay that doesn't involve a gun, you know? I
Really?
It's so fucking hard. Most of my screenplays involve guns because it's very hard not to have one, you know?
Oh, indoctrinating our children, Peter.
Yeah,
So
I know, but
disappointing. Yeah.
I've been indoctrinated, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, that's a funny thing. But, yeah, I kinda wanna throw it back to you because 'cause I'm kinda curious your thought on, like, solutions and what you think we should focus on. I will say this, I guess I have one more point before I lose it, which is that, you know, people say it's not guns, it's people.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that.
Well, I mean, I'm kinda curious, like, your thought on that. We've talked about this a little bit, but, I mean, I think that it is guns. I know that this is just, like, you know, an interesting thing for us to like maybe disagree on, but like, do you
Yeah.
think it's people or do you think it's guns? You know, because this is like kind of a
I think
fundamental
it's
starting
people.
place.
I think
Okay.
it's people. I think it's people, and
Well,
here's
let
why.
me just stop you. Okay. Well, I want to
Sure.
ask real quick and jump in. Do
Yeah. Yeah.
you think it is possible, at all possible, to have 400 million guns, more guns than people in this country, and to not have this problem because there's no mental health crisis? Like, is there any world where that's not pure fantasy?
Wait, lay that out for me again.
Is there any world where any country, take any country, and give them more guns than people?
Uh-huh.
Would they
Oh,
not
and
have a
then
gun problem?
there's not something like this?
Right.
I
Japan,
mean,
France, take any country, give them more guns than people. Could they conceivably not have a problem?
there's places, like, I know you're allowed to own a gun in Switzerland, and I'm pretty sure it's not more guns than people, but you're allowed to own a gun there, and I don't think they have a huge epidemic with this kinda stuff. I mean, there's places
Okay.
where you can, like, obviously, it's illegal to own a gun, but a lot of people do, like Russia.
Right.
But, uh, I think we're at a point in society right now where we're just kinda starting to come out of the dark ages of, like, a heteromasculine culture like writ large that has convinced us that something like I think there is a mental health crisis, I guess, and what I think is that we've been so averse to therapy in any form, whether it's talk therapy
Does
or
therapy even work though? I hate to be a skeptic, but does it?
yeah, yeah, no, it does. I mean, anecdotally for me, but also I'd have to dig a little bit into the research around it, but yeah, absolutely, man, especially
I think
for
that like if
acute
you've grown up in
conditions.
foster care and never had any parents or role models and you learned how to steal since you were 2 years old, I don't think therapy is gonna solve your I just don't think it's gonna I think like
Well, I
economic
think
stability and good friends will solve it, but I don't think a therapist is gonna do much.
yeah, but
I
that's
have a
one
psychology degree and like I'm so jaded about this shit. So maybe I'm overly jaded. But
but that's one tail chasing the other where it's like how do you get to the place where you have economic stability and a good group of friends? You have to achieve some form of mental stability first. And I think that one of the reasons why traditional therapy isn't super effective is because it doesn't take into account psychedelic therapies, like drug assisted
I
therapies,
agree. Yeah.
like things that can actually have a meaningful
I'm stoked
impact.
about psychedelic therapies.
Oh
Yeah.
my god, dude. I mean,
It's
just,
actually kind of exciting. Yeah.
it's super exciting, man, because just like when LSD first came out in the late 50s, early 60s, dude, psychologists were calling it a miracle drug. They were like, "This is
Yeah.
insane. We've never
Yeah.
seen results like this from patients. We've never seen we've never seen people heal trauma this effectively with this much with this much of a lasting result. And then it
Mm,
was bottled up, and it was, it was caught up in the culture war, and we know where that story ends. But
yep.
now we're coming back into an age where MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin, and to a lesser extent LSD are giving people a way to reframe their perspective in a way that's not just trying to talk through it, because it's so hard to um, talk your way out of a box that you don't know that you're inside of.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just need to be yanked out of that box, because you
Yeah.
can talk yourself into a million circles, to which I think is maybe part of your point about, does therapy work? Because I've had, I went to therapists when I was a kid because I was a troubled youth, and they were all full of shit, man. It was
Right.
it was a frustrating experience. It wasn't helpful to me at all.
They can legit make things worse too, which
I
no one
think they
ever
did
talks
make
about.
things worse for me,
Yeah.
but then as an adult, I went and saw a somatic psychotherapist, which was like a very nuanced school of, psychotherapy that involves the body and the way that we store memory and stuff like that. I found it tremendously helpful. And for me, I can see that there was a turning point in my life, my ability to do all kinds of things. Like
Yeah.
even kind of ADHD type symptoms were, you know, resolved. I mean, you know me, you've seen me become a lot more calm and effective in the last probably
True.
like, yeah, like 5 to 7 years. And I think that therapy was a huge part of that. It wasn't the
Hmm.
main part of it. It was a huge part of it. Um, I think I think that when I think about how many people are dealing with depression and are on antidepressants in this country, and SSRIs, and opiates and opioids for pain and for stuff like that, man. I think like, wow, we're in a society that's so beholden to like the large pharmaceutical interests, and so suppressive of natural medicines, and suppressive of just lifestyle factors that
Yeah.
allow people to alleviate themselves, like you mentioned all of them earlier about, exercising and having a having a strong social safety net, and having a good economic situation, a stable economic situation,
I'd
even if
throw in
you
like
like,
healthy food too to that. Yeah.
oh man, 1,000%, all that stuff. And I think that if we had a movement where the government is more responsible for providing information to people, and if not, if I mean, at the minimum information, but at the most, resources to pursue being able to have some of these things for
Mhm.
themselves, I think a lot of people would be in a different situation, in their relationship to anything unhealthy, be it like pharmaceuticals or drugs or guns or whatever. Like I see people reaching out, like even if people aren't shooting themselves or shooting each other, you see a lot of people reaching out for something that's destructive, whether it's emotionally destructive or physically destructive, in a lot of
Yeah.
different ways in our society right now, man. And I think it's I think that Pandora is out of the box with guns. And
Yeah.
to segue into something else you said in the beginning of the episode, we're now in the era of ghost guns,
Yeah.
where even if you were to outlaw firearms, what you'd have to do is meaningfully restrict the supply of ammunition in the United States. And then even then, you've got people with hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition stockpiled. You're never going to find them. There's
Mhm.
probably billions of rounds of ammunition present in the US at any given moment, like not being like in private hands, So I think that to functionally, here's where I sit on the gun debate as a whole. I think it's almost impossible to think about tackling gun ownership issues except for making it more difficult for young people in that demographic range
Yeah.
that are more likely to shoot up a school or do something nefarious with that gun. Maybe it should be a little harder for them to get a gun. Not impossible, but just like a screening process that's effective and discouraging to somebody that would want to just kind of walk in, walk out with a gun. Make it take
Mhm.
a couple weeks or a month, where you got to sit and think about it. If you want to fucking kill yourself with a gun, man, and you got to sit with it for a couple months and think about it, maybe it's just your time, dog. You know what I'm saying? I don't have any judgment on people that can't handle the human experience. It's really rugged, and it gets harder as you get older. but I think taking it out of
It gets
people's
easier in some regards.
it does, yeah, you're right. It does
Youth
get easier.
sucks. Youth kind of sucks. That's
Yeah,
why
yeah,
everyone's all
and you're
angsty and
so
makes
hot
awesome
and
music.
bothered. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and you're so bothered by everything and shit.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
just think that the ability to help people live a better life where they're not looking for a firearm as a way to do anything other than be recreational or protect themselves, that that reality lies in helping people live a better life, not in taking away their guns. That's my kind of thesis.
Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting. I agree, here and there with almost all of that. I mean, my only thing, and I think this is just my framing I always go to, is I just don't think we're trying to solve any of these problems, nor should we. I think it's just we're just 5% less here, 5% less here. Like you said, make
Smart,
it slightly harder for so
smart.
that we have 10% fewer shootings in schools this year,
Yeah.
and then like keep whittling away at that. But I also like I think that it's okay to be like super anxious. It's okay to be super depressed. It's okay.
Mhm.
That also is part of the human experience. It's
Mm,
fine. The thing that's not fine is to kill yourself or other people because you're doing a normal human thing. We
mhm.
stigmatize depression and anxiety like galore. It's fine. We're all stressed out and depressed, and we clinicalize everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, here's a thought. Like, get off Instagram if you're a girl. If you're a guy, get off dating apps and just, you know, I don't know, run more. And like very,
Yeah.
very, very simple things. But like you wouldn't have gotten off social media, let's just say, and you wouldn't have started running if you didn't have that stress or anxiety or depression. It can prompt you to do amazing things. I started writing, and I'm a writer to this day because I had a really severe Achilles injury, and for the first and kind of only time in my life, I was like horribly depressed and had no friends through
Yeah.
all of high school because I couldn't move and I was like into sports.
Mhm.
So I started writing, and it's like the best gift that I've ever given to myself is just having a go-to hobby that's always fulfilling to me. You can find gold. There's that saying, at the bottom of the ocean, you might find a pearl. That's what anxiety and stress and sadness give you. And I think that for some reason we're always like, oh God, these things are so bad. Oh God. It's like, no, they're rich and awesome and amazing. And they're part of the human experience. And like if you're like so depressed you can't get out of bed, that's a problem. You probably need help. Um, but also that's kind of fine. That's a part of life. We always talk about last no no in my rant here, but we always talk about people as if like this guy is always depressed. Check in on
Sure.
him through his 90-year life. He went through phases, his ups
Yeah.
and downs, and this is literally everyone. Like, name one person who's literally anxiety ridden or depressed their whole entire life. No, like we go through these things, we go through these phases, and that's life. It's the roller coaster, man. I think that we have this thing where we want everyone to have like this super even keel. Oh, we're all like we can all sit through math class without a disturbance. We can all,
Sure.
boring fucking people. I think that Americans are supposed to lean into the madness and we're supposed to lean into the
True.
craziness because like that's where icons are. Look at Cardi B, look at
Look at Cardi B.
look at
Dude, upholding a scion of mental health prowess and success in our country is such as Cardi B.
our famous people are freaking wackadoos, and that's great. That's who we kind of should lean into to being. But the thing that's just bad is when you take your demons and you kill people with them. Take your demons and channel it somewhere else. I don't know, just do anything, just don't do that.
But you have to have the tools to do that, right? Like you come from like a home where your mom and your dad are still together, right?
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, you're already starting at this huge advantage in comparison to certain other people and a disadvantage in comparison to other people too. But like what your ability to kind of flip your experience of your Achilles heel being damaged and like, put that into
Yes.
a healthy pursuit, that depends a lot on already having a stable environment to build a foundational experience from. And a lot of people don't have that. And
Right.
it's not, I mean, there is a huge human element to it, but I think one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that some of the anxiety and depression is normal, but some of it is driven by capitalism and by the pressure that's put on you by, you know, in a kind of second tier removal of the United States government and the way that it subsidizes corporations, the way it subsidizes wage slavery, the way that it kind of fails to be an effective stopgap between like the unquenchable greed of people who want to exploit you for your time and your money, or your time and your labor. And it's supposed to be something that helps us build a reality that we're able to live as a society in an effective way and be with each other in ways that are normalistic. You know what I'm saying? And I think that when you've got a system that's oppressive like that by its nature, some people are able to take those experiences of depression and anxiety that are driven by like just this Rube Goldberg machine of being ass fucked by society, and they're able to flip that. Like, I'm a good example of that. I grew up with like less than nothing,
Mhm.
and I'm in a position now in my life where I'm doing all right, man. Like, it's not, I'm not Jeff Bezos, but I'm also like not doing meth,
Not yet.
not yet. And so it's like, there has to be some kind of superstructure that's, I mean, if it's not provided by the government, then I don't know whose it's being provided by,
Well, can
where people.
I want to jump in with a little thing. It was like one
Sure.
little note there because I do agree with this point. But we actually truly do not need that much to be okay in life. What makes us miserable is that we always compare ourselves to other people. And so like the average American, like I don't know if like this is not ever said, but like the average American is significantly wealthier than the average UK person.
Oh, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Like we're pretty goddamn all even our quote unquote poor people pretty goddamn wealthy. We have
True.
like basically free Wi-Fi. You can get you can name the list
AirPods.
of shit that's free. Yeah, you can in so many different ways. We're just blessed. We
Yeah.
like education is too expensive and housing is too expensive and
Right.
healthcare is a shit show. We got a couple things, but like where we're failing, I think is, and this sounds so goddamn conservative, but I think it's just kind of true. We're failing in community building
Yeah.
and making people feel like they're a part of something. We're
Yeah.
so into like this dog eat dog race of like it's
Yeah.
me versus you.
Yeah.
And I think that that is part of what you're talking about. Rather than like we're in this together, my community is strong.
Yeah.
It's easy to make friends rather than it's everyone's like staring at their phones. There's a lot of
Hmm.
stuff there. I'm Mr. Big government most of the time, but I do think that even if we give each other, give everyone, lift all boats, just, so everyone makes whatever they're making now times 50, we're still going to be the same demographics. They're still going to be just as miserable because they're going to have, like, compared to some other demographic, less shit. And they're still not going to have good communities. I don't know. I mean, do you see kind of like the point I'm you know, so, semi
It's not a.
articulating here?
Yeah, no, it's not untaken. I feel like that is part and parcel, like kind of the whole mental health issue in the first place, like living by
Yes.
comparison, catastrophizing. Like there's a whole kind of litany of low hanging fruit that when you begin the journey towards good mental health, you start confronting some of these things that you think and some of these things that you feel,
Yeah.
and intellectualizing them, or internalizing, externalizing these things as necessary to build a more cohesive sense of self and a better sense of kind of connection and well-being in your environment.
Mhm.
It's just not a resource that's available to a lot of people. And it's not like a it might be like a human pathology, something that naturally is emergent in a society that has wealth. But in a society that has so much wealth, like we spend so much money subsidizing people to be on SSRIs, which, PS, we don't actually know how they work,
Did
right?
you
Like
see the news story about that? Big
no, what?
study. Oh, well, this is worth looking at. This happened like 2 weeks ago, I think. Big study just came out. SSRIs don't do shit.
Yeah, man. I
Like
mean, I
it's better to take a walk and eat a bar of chocolate than to take an SSRI. And this is
agree.
like a completely legit, like longitudinal big study thing that just happened. And it's like, oh fuck, these things don't work. you know?
Yeah, and meanwhile, all of these drugs were the R&D for all of these drugs was almost fully subsidized by the United States government. But
Yeah, and
we've
universities.
been
Yeah.
looking at the same food pyramid for fucking like 45 years that has it has like grains at the base of the pyramid, you know what
I
I'm
was in a
saying?
doctor's office 2 weeks ago, and they had an updated food pyramid, and it was intimidating because there was a fuck ton of vegetables and like
Really?
not much grain. I was like,
That's
"Ooh,
hella
if
funny. You're
that's
like,
a real thing, that's hard,
"Oh."
man. Give me the old one. I want the old one."
Right. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think that as a culture, we're starting to move out of a period where the idea of talking to somebody about your problems is starting to be less of an issue. We're starting to move out of a time where the vast majority of fathers are emotionally unavailable and moving into like, the soft cuck lib father era of like men who are down to like wear their baby in a little fucking pack in front of them and like be sweet
Totally,
and
yeah.
loving to their children and like think more about their place in their own world and how what their emotional connections are to it, and like Gen Z is such a reflection of that. You see
Mhm,
how much more open-minded they are, how much more engaged they are emotionally with certain things, sometimes too much. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Like cancel culture is a weird reflection of like an overly emotional engagement with like, I don't know, the past, things that people have done, but
right.
in certain instances, I should say. But yeah, man, I think we're seeing the slow shift of society to accommodate people and to make people feel more held and more community driven, more mentally safe. But we're going to be in this contact zone for the next, like, I don't know, as long as I'm alive, where we're going to watch all of these older people die off that were terrible influences on their children. And we're going to
Mhm,
watch a lot of my generation who still had shitty fathers being shitty fathers to their kids. And it's going to just reduce by like, a power, like a small amount every generation until we're in a place where there's more understanding between people, there's more emotional awareness, there's more space given for strangeness in society and for exotic emotional states and stuff like that. I mean, so at the end of the day, even if we don't live in a world where our government subsidizes our happiness,
mhm.
which we should, because it would help everything. I think that's my argument at the end of the day is that the government should subsidize happiness, not medication. And,
Whoa, whoa.
you
Okay,
know,
that made my mind like click on a number of levels, just like you said that.
well, it's like
That's just
Bhutan, right?
interesting.
Like,
Just well,
that's
because
what they
the
do.
government is us, right? And we're supposed to form healthy communities by
Right.
pooling our resources, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's what the government is supposed to do. I don't know
Supposedly,
exactly what
yeah.
it does half the time, but
Yeah. Well, it's like, I talk about this. I mean, I don't want to get too far off the map with guns and stuff, but I was talking with my partner Karen about this the other day about how, in the UK, you get like a certain amount of money that you can spend on your political campaign, and that's it. It's like
oh, is that true?
100K.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
okay.
like
I feel like
100K
I've
or
heard
something
that.
like that. Yeah, they don't
Okay.
let you spend like an infinite amount of money. They
Hmm.
give you an amount of money. I think it's like this in Australia too, but they give you like
Whoa.
they're like, here's 100K. You spend on whatever you want, but you can't spend more than that. And I think that's why
Man, that would
politics
fix
is
so many things here if
it
we had
fixed so
that.
many things.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have because now you've got this generation of politicians that's more interested in the fame of being a politician because
Hmm.
politicians weren't famous before unless you were the president.
Hmm.
Now you can be some wackadoodle fucking senator, some wackadoodle Republican, or I mean, sorry, congressperson, Freudian slip, and you could be some wackadoodle Democrat too, and you become famous because you are a firebrand and all this stuff, and you can see that people get caught up in the idea of it where they're like, ooh, maybe I'm not a good singer or I'm not a good I can't play an instrument or I can't
Hmm.
like play sports, but I can be like a fucking crazy person on television if I'm a politician
Dude. Hey,
and there's money in it.
since we solved guns already, can I ask you a can I ask you
Solve subsidize
uh
happiness.
yeah, I wanna exactly, dude. Let me ask you a question that's completely unrelated. Maybe it is, but
Yeah.
it's related to your point about the politicians thing,
Okay.
which definitely does go back to guns, I guess. But
Okay.
did you follow the Tulsi Gabbard thing? And what do you think of her? I'm just so curious. I have some friends who are still like mega on board with her, and I'm like so just like disillusioned by her, and it happened for a long time. What do you think? Have you followed that at all?
I don't know much about her. I
Okay.
remember seeing her on Rogan, the first time, and then I listened to more than half of her podcast on Rogan this time. He's, like, wet about the lady because she's pretty reasonable, and I think that's, like,
Hmm.
kind of, hard to come by in politics nowadays, which I found her to be pretty reasonable too, like, I've at least
Well, 'cause
in
I did not watch it 'cause I can't like, she turns my stomach. So I wanna
Really?
yeah, can I let me tell you why,
Please.
okay, so she used to, uh, come from the left and have left talking points to solve specific issues. And
Okay.
now she has fully adopted right-wing talking points,
Mm.
and she has gone to CPAC. She's like on
Ooh.
Tucker Carlson all the time. She hosted Tucker Carlson's show before. She
Oh.
just now, from what I've seen, just talks about culture war issues. People are like, oh, but she's a liberal, she's Bernie, blah blah blah. She never talks about like down the line issues. She's so just leaning into
Mm.
culture war shit and oh, the woke this and the woke that. It's like
That
I don't think
sucks.
that's a politician's place to be even talking about that shit.
Nah, me
She
neither.
sounds like Ted Cruz to me. When I hear her talk, she sounds like Ted Cruz. And I think that she's like straight up bought. I think that she got 1% of the Democratic vote and she's like, okay, I don't have a future here. There's no money in here. I'm going to do the Dave Rubin thing, pivot to the right.
Where
And
there's money.
now I'm going to have my new platform. I'm going to be on Tucker every night and I
Sure.
have an audience. And Joe Rogan still loves me because, he's pretty easy to get you to love him, honestly. What do
Yeah,
you
the
think about
culture.
that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the culture war stuff, man, drives me nuts. And the
Yeah.
gun debate is a huge part of that. Where it's like, it's it's so tactical, where there's so much kind of like feigned outrage about culture war stuff, where it's just like, man, we used to live in a society where, like, yeah, politicians weren't really supposed to talk about that kind of stuff. And if you didn't like what was going on, you didn't really talk about it either. You just had your opinions and you voted how you wanted to. And I see how that promotes ignorance of certain
Mhm.
critical issues in a certain way. But then there's also an element of it where it's like, you're not going to change people. You're not going to change people. It's
You're going
like,
to get
it
your
doesn't,
followers. That's what you're
you're
going
going
to
to,
do,
yeah,
you
you're going
know?
to talk to the people that believe in what you're talking about. But are you going to convince a 65-year-old dude in fucking the heartland of the country to use a different pronoun for you? Probably not. And is it a
Mhm.
hill that you want to die on? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like, do you want to be in a place where people respect you and see you? Then you move somewhere where people do that, but you're
Mhm.
not going to be able to change culture writ large because you care about one thing or another. And that goes for Republicans and Democrats. Like, you're just not going to be able to turn the tide. You got to go somewhere where people think like you if you're that
Yeah.
obsessed about being around people that think like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you one more question, and then we
Sure.
can probably wrap things up for the
Strap
week.
it up.
Just wrap it up. What do you think about the this is a Tulsi Gabbard talking point, also a Republican talking point about
Mm.
Ukraine, which is basically kind of like let Putin win, let him take Donbass, and let's step away. My thought on that, and this is like Bosch says this. I'm a little influenced by the lefty talking points on this, maybe,
Sure.
but like Bosch will say, the last thing that you want is for Putin to come out of this war like actually a winner.
100%.
If he is like stoked on just like, oh fuck, I just took over the Donbass and these other regions,
And
guess
everybody's cool
what?
with it.
I'm going to creep up to the Poland border. Sorry, everyone. And the
Yeah.
second like Russia creeps up to the Poland border, I think the world is gonna fucking be over. I think that we do have to make sure that we don't give him Donbass. We don't give the fucker anything until like I don't think we want him to have to admit that he lost either, because
Yeah.
he's gonna take the ship down with him if he has to admit to his people he lost. But
Right.
he has plenty of outs. He controls the state media. He can step away from this war whenever he wants. I think that kind
Right.
of like pushing back without going to the nuclear war, not let him get to Poland, and okay, that's my you know I think that that's where I sit. This is also too complicated for me, but the right, and this is Tulsi Gabbard's thing, is like let Putin take Donbass, let him take certain parts of Ukraine, let him win basically, and then that will be peace, because that's a negotiation. That's coming to the table and negotiating with him rather than just saying fuck you, because fuck you is going to lead to nuclear war. I don't know. I'm sure that there's some reason there too, I'm sure. It kind of makes sense that you want to also have open discourse and blah 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 blah. But I don't know. I'm kind of like, I don't know. I think that he started this war and he needs to back away from it. Uh, what do you have any thoughts on this?
We have historical precedent for this exact. Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
we have
this is good. Let's
historical
hear it.
precedent for this exact thing. This is what we did with Hitler in the 40s, right? In the
Hmm.
early 40s. He was like, I think I'm just gonna grab this little sliver. And they're like, just let him have it. It's
Right.
not a big deal. You know what I mean? It's like, we'll just let him have it and then he'll be chill. And then another, couple months goes by, another 6 months goes by, and wants another little sliver here. And people are like, this isn't our fucking fight. Let's just let him have his thing. It's called appeasement, man. It's like, this is a
Yeah.
process that like, as a global society, we've been known to encourage when it comes to dictatorial people.
Hmm.
We can't do that. It has to be a high crime in 2022 to have a ground war with another country,
Hmm.
period.
Wow,
Unless
that's
there's,
exactly what I think. Yeah.
yeah, it's got to be a high crime. I mean, I feel I'm personally kind of frustrated with the United States in the sense that, like, everything that comes from Russia needs to be completely embargoed. Like, there needs to be a 100% complete embargo on everything from Russia, and
Hmm.
Europe needs to do that too. Like, you need to be made a pariah state when
So
you
their economy kind
engage.
of collapses, sort of thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you engage in physical conflict in 2022, or any time going forward, like, you need to be completely made a pariah on the world stage, and then see if you want that little scrap of land, because it's
Yeah.
not 1896. You actually don't need that little scrap of land. Why don't you worry about the enormous swath of land that you already fucking control, and try to help your people out a little bit before you're trying to steal these little scraps? It's psycho. This is
Hmm.
like this is that
While destroying beautiful cities.
dude, it's this
It's
weird
so disgusting.
heteromasculine
Yeah.
like culture, like this weird heteromasculine culture that we've been like just absolutely in a fugue state through for the last like fucking 10,000 years, man. It's like, come on, guys, like, you don't need that extra piece. You need to be caring and compassionate and worry about what your people are going through. You don't need this extra, another little badge on the breast, another little, another dagger on the hilt. It's like, you just need to, like, take care of what's going on with you. And yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think so. And I think
So
that
you're
people are going to get frustrated. I was watching something from Ukraine today and I'm like, hey, dog, you're only going to be able to do this for like another like amount of time before the world gets together and is like, yo, this is like some Nazi occupation shit. And we're going to have to say no at this point, because you can only watch so much like war crime happen
Yeah.
before public sentiment is going to turn to be like, actually, I don't know, maybe we should fucking like start war with Russia.
So if Russia, you're making me more confident in my own view here. So this is maybe not good. But last question, because I'm just
Yeah,
curious your thought on this. As if we have any say in any of this shit, but it's fun to talk about.
sure, sure.
Um, if Russia does use a quote unquote tactical nuke and let's say
Yeah,
takes out a portion of a city, let's say, or something like this,
sure.
uh, what the fuck do we do? How do we respond without like many cities going down?
Complete embargo, man, like complete financial economic embargo. I mean, I
Okay,
think that
yeah,
is got to be like because we can't just like bomb we can't just bomb one of their cities like we did with
that's what I
Japan.
think too.
Like,
I would be so disheartened by America if we
yeah, we
responded
can't
by
do
like
that.
leveling St. Petersburg or something or
Yeah, and
Moscow.
we
But
don't have
God, that
like a
would not make
Truman.
me a
Yeah,
happy
it,
American.
no, and we don't have a
And
Truman,
I want to
man.
be a
That was a
happy
different
American,
time.
Devin. I want to be proud of my flag, right?
Me too, man. I'm gonna be proud of my flag with my guns and my fucking strawberry cheesecake.
With my
You
guns
know,
and my striped flag wrapped around me, and my
that's right, baby.
Bud Light and my what else is American? I don't know. Tucker
Baseball, hot
Carlson on
dogs,
every night.
dude. Every night, baby. Crack
Every
me a
night. I
Bud
go to
Light
sleep to
and give
his
me some
beautiful
Tucker.
tones.
Oh man, with his little mouth that's like a little fish.
It
And I
is.
think, and what I've been it's so funny how he final note for me, how Tucker Carlson sounds like a mewling infant. like he's like 4 years old. Like his whole tone is like, "But mommy, I don't want to eat the Cheerios. I just
Whoa,
want to have I just want to have hot dogs." You
that
know,
is him.
it's
Oh
so
man,
wild, dude. It's so strange to
yeah,
me
that's
to hear
hilarious.
him like, yeah, divorced from the context of what he's saying, a mewling fucking child, dude.
Totally. Whoa, that actually like that's how I see him. I've never actually expressed that. That's exactly how I see him. It's very funny.
100.
Well, the gun thing wasn't quite as contentious as I was maybe think.
Hoping.
Well, the thing is, I think that you and I, this is so interesting to me. You and I always go to like the cultural things around it.
Right.
Right, I haven't studied up enough on like the hard policy to like argue with
Yeah.
you about this fucking policy, man. You
Right,
know,
right, right.
but like the human nature side of it and stuff like that, it is the most interesting part. And you're right, it's the
Yeah.
most complex. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's always what I always want to talk about as well. Um, I
Let
don't
me say
know.
this.
Yeah, okay,
Final note on guns for me, and why don't
mhm,
you give your closing thought on
okay.
guns? My closing thought on guns is, and this may be a little asynchronous with kind of the conversation thus far, is that
Hmm,
I'm always happy to live in a society that's full of guns, because I think
hmm.
it's one of the reasons why we still live in a free society. I think that there's a lot of different ways that subliminally and coercively that we're enslaved by capitalism and by like superstructures of government and power, but we're free as fuck, dude. I mean, we're kind of free to a level that there is no country on earth that's this free, and that's an it. I'm for me inarguable, and I think that having a shitload of guns is one of the reasons why we've never had a military coup in this country, why we've never been invaded by another country, why we've
Well,
never had you know
see,
serious.
I want to push back on that a little bit. Do have to run in 10 minutes, but I want
Yeah,
to push
yeah,
back a little. That like I think the reason why we've never been invaded is because we're surrounded by
we're
two
an island.
oceans and we're
Yeah, yeah,
friends
yeah,
with
yeah.
the people above us. No one can invade America. You just can't fucking do it. It's just not possible, like
True.
logistically. Two, we are like way down low on the list of freedoms, like countries that rank on freedom. We're not as nearly as free as we think we are, and I think that like symbols like guns and the flag give us like an excuse to think that we're more free than we are.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot there, but I don't think that we're very free. I really don't. I think that other countries are more free than us because it's like it's actually on paper. People have written this out, and we're not that fucking free. Uh, and we're wealthy. We're very wealthy, But the freedom thing, I think that we get too hard about that, and we're not actually. But anyway, I don't know.
But you kind
Uh,
of can do whatever the fuck you want here.
Yeah, in terms of like expressing ourselves, and there's a lot of ways in which we are free. I'll have to pull up those articles that
Yeah,
rank. There's an
I'd love to see
organization that
that.
ranks countries by freedom. We ain't
Sure.
that fucking free though compared to like anyway. It's just interesting because that's kind of part of the propaganda that I think that we all like consume as children. That we're the free and the brave. Woohoo! It's in there right
Right,
there in the
right.
fucking song. I think it's propaganda.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, my future, which
Yeah.
feel free to push back on too, because this is dumb. But I'm gonna say it anyway. Um, my future is, or my gun stance is, I think that I want to eventually like eke and crawl and creep our way towards this form of utopia where no one feels like we need to have guns because we live in safe, healthy communities
Yeah, that'd
where
be awesome.
the government does its job and like protects us without terrorizing good people.
Mhm.
And I think that I want humanity itself to not be nearly as violent as
Yeah.
we are today and to have a
Yes.
problem and not to reach for a gun to solve that problem. I think that
Yes.
that's kind of like, and we're talking maybe a couple hundred years out if Putin doesn't destroy the world. I think that this
Yeah.
is not it's not an easy fix and it's not a policy thing necessarily.
Mhm.
It's a couple of policy tweaks and us like somehow growing as a community. Yeah,
I
which
like your
sounds
argument
nice,
better
but I
than
think it's a
mine.
little silly because it's so utopian. But I don't know. What do you what
No,
are
I don't
your
think it
thoughts on
is.
that?
I think at the end of the day, I have a visceral attachment to certain ideas, but you often make me feel differently about that because I think you're right. I think at the end of the
Mm,
day, if it had to come to my vision, your vision, I'd take yours any day, where you start slow, you claw back at the margins, you begin the change one step at a time, and you set your sights on something that is maybe in the modern view utopian, but in a certain way isn't outside the boundaries of reality, man. If you start a slow process of change and we all work towards it, I think merging your and I visions,
Yes.
policy issues that kind of help at the margins for some of these bigger problems, and then also subsidizing like health and happiness in the United States at a federal level and at a state level, like those two things could completely change the fabric of this country within a generation, man.
Oh, I totally agree. I absolutely agree. There's so much there. Wow. Okay. Well, that
Wow,
was
all
very good.
right.
That was great, Devin.
Yeah.
Hey, until next time, everybody, Team Futurism. Have a great week.